Okay, we are just a couple of moments past the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and start. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited about this event today. Welcome to Libraries and Higher Education. How can we meet the moment? This is a Library Juice Connections event with a wonderful, wonderful panel of folks talking about all the things that we need to know these days. And just before I pass it off to them to tell us about it, just want to say a couple of things about Library Juice as an organization, some of the things that we have going on. Library Juice Press, which is one of our arms, we publish books that examine theoretical and practical issues in librarianship from a critical perspective for an audience of professional librarians and students of library science. Library Juice Press is an imprint of Litwin Books, so you can find more about us at litwinbooks.com. In addition to books, we are the proud publisher of two academic journals, the Journal of Critical Library and Information Studies, as well as the Journal of Critical Digital Librarianship, which, of course, both of those, as you can tell from the title, carry on our critical investigations of the LIS field. I encourage you, when you have time, as your curiosity allows, to go ahead and take a look at those journals. If you write, if you do research in those fields, I hope you'll consider reaching out and talking to us more about possibly being part of it. Another arm of what we do is Library Juice Academy, where we offer a range of online professional development courses for librarians and archivists and staff at large in the ecosystem of LIS. So we do asynchronous learning over a 4-week period. This is ideal for upscaling support staff as well as professional staff and all of us who realize that we don't quite know everything we thought we needed to know as our jobs evolve around us. We offer institutional bundle pricing as well as CEOs and PDHs for those of us collecting those. And then today we are very proud to announce the launch of Library Juice Connections, which is a central place for all of our events. Right? We have a lot going on. So we wanted one umbrella organization, one umbrella space to group our events so make them easier to find, a little bit easier to share. And so, in addition to being a central space for our events, this is also a space for new ways to connect. We have a lot of exciting new programming happening here and a place for connections for all of us thinking about the role of libraries in today's world. I encourage you to take a look and follow along with all we're up to on all the social medias, all the places we like to spend time. We have Blue Sky and Facebook and Mastodon, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. That's everything I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited now to turn this over to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and to everyone at Library Juice Press Litwin Books. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. I see our participant count is up over 130, which tells me that you, just as those of us on the panel, are interested in how we might, as library professionals, as higher education professionals, meet the political moment. So my name is Emily Drabinski, and I will be serving today just as the convener and moderator, and invite you to share any questions or feedback in the Q&A. We will leave plenty of time for conversation at the end of this session. You don't need me to rehearse all of the ways that both libraries and higher education are under attack under the current administration. When we learned on Friday night that Carla Hayden was being terminated from her position at the Library of Congress, replaced, I hear this morning, by one of Donald Trump's personal attorneys, we can see the disdain that this administration has for the good work that we do, that we are workers who can be eliminated and replaced at will. Dr. Hayden is not the only librarian who's lost her job in the federal system. We've seen people from libraries as small as the Library for Railroad Workers. They have seen staff firings, the National Library of Medicine, the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation. All of the librarians serving in those federal capacities are facing job loss. We also know that higher education is under attack. Just the cutting of grant funds across the board in every discipline, including our colleagues at STEM, who I think for a very long time thought they might be exempt from what is happening. But I want to say also that we are experiencing the attacks from the Trump administration in the context of more than 4 decades of systematic disinvestment in public institutions, particularly the kinds of institutions in which the 4 panelists serve today. We when I first started in academic libraries at Long Island University, Brooklyn, we had 13 faculty librarians. When I left 10 years later, we had 2. And I think that probably is similar to what most of you are facing. So we are experiencing these attacks at institutions that have already faced significant attempts to undermine what we do, what we care about, and that has left us in a position where we don't have the resources necessary. I would suggest, and I hope that during the course of the next 50 minutes we figure it out, but to effectively form a resistance that could push against this moment. So how are we going to do that? So we're joined today by 3 individuals who will share their perspectives. And I'd like to invite our first panelist, and each of them will introduce themselves and share a bit about their work. And so we'll start with a bit of a historical perspective from my colleague at the City University of New York, Roxanne Shirazi. Roxanne, it's over to you.
Hi, thanks, Emily. I do have just some quick slides that I'm going to put up here. And by way of a brief introduction to myself, sorry about that. I can say that, hi, I'm Roxanne Shirazi. I am the head of archives and special collections and associate professor at the CUNY Graduate Center, that being the City University of New York. I am here to give a little context. I'm not going to unearth any hidden histories that are, nothing here should be news to anyone, especially those of us on this call. But I'm going to highlight some moments that are likely familiar because we're in a different moment, which I'm frequently reminded, okay, but it's not the past. We're in a different moment. That's very true. Sometimes we do need to look to the past for inspiration, though, I think. And we're going to need to be imaginative, creative, disciplined, and grounded as we do this work. And for me personally, spending some time with our professional past actually does do that, right? So gets my kind of creative juices flowing, hearing how things were, as well as helping gird us for this fight. So let's get started. To begin with one of the most famous acts of defiance by an academic librarian, we have Zoya Horn. And this is actually sort of a screenshot from a Bucknell magazine from 2022, which was the 50-year anniversary of this. And so in some ways, it is another instance of our institutions, loving to highlight our defiance well afterwards, as long as it's long ago. But to begin with this, primarily because we're here talking about academic libraries as part of higher education. And I think it's a very good reminder that privacy and confidentiality and these struggles over access to information are not just for public libraries, right? As we have been going through recent years, as I have conversations with my colleagues in various spaces in the university, I'm constantly reminding them, libraries have been under attack for quite a few years right now. And academic librarians have one foot in the library world and one foot in the higher ed world. And faculty should really be talking to the academic librarians who are engaged in these broader fights around our profession and our values and ethics, especially related to access to information. Okay, so Zoya Horn, this is a picture. She's the librarian on the right, and Patricia Rahm. In 1971, they worked at Bucknell University and were active in different activist spaces, but were called by a grand jury in connection with the Harrisburg 7 case. So this was, I won't go into the history of the case, but the point is that they were called and they discussed how the FBI had come and visited them and asked a lot of questions about who was using the library and who, what they were interested in and what their behavior was and all of this. When Zoya was actually called to testify for the prosecution, she refused. And for her, this was a matter of principle. It was a matter of principle to advocate for a special role for an academic librarian, or for a librarian, actually, generally, along the lines of a lawyer or even a priest, to have some special relationship with our patrons and the people we serve, some special role where we would not be called to divulge information. And that's sort of, I think we all know about this case, hopefully, but what's important is remembering that this is happening in the context of a university, I think, for us, right? It's easy to think this idea that people would be trying to access information is often, at least in recent years, I think, framed as a public library issue. But this is a reminder that it's very alive and present in academia. And then again, so the next decade, some of you may also be aware of the Library Awareness Program. And these are some headlines and screenshots from reports in 1988. And that one in the back, which is all, cruddy, actually was made available through Eric. Good news for Eric. But the list of academic institutions there, it says at the top, the Office for Intellectual Freedom has written documentation or press accounts of these visits and requests made by FBI agents. So again, this is at the height of the Cold War, where the FBI was continuing to surveil, including academic libraries. And then again, later on, we saw this sort of revival of the same tactic in the wake of 9/11 and George W. Bush's so-called war on terror, where libraries were targeted with national security letters, the provision for national security letters in the Patriot Act, right? And we know of the Connecticut Four. And again, I think partly because of that recent history, it's easy to think, oh, that's a public library issue, right? People don't come to academic libraries in that way. During the Cold War and during the Vietnam War, there very much was an effort to surveil by the FBI in libraries. And I think that, I did the wrong thing. Okay. I think that the lesson there is that control of information is what's central to these moments. And we're seeing that again here in today's moment. So librarians standing up for these professional principles and carving out the role in line with a real code of ethics and all of these kind of aspirational documents that we've all sort of learned about, that standing up for those professional principles is the fight now. That by doing that, we are actually also defending democracy. And I think that what we often see, or at least what I see and hear from people, and certainly feel myself, is this idea that, librarians are broke and exhausted and we've had a really rough time. And now you want us to save democracy? Like, I can't have, I just want to have a job. How can I do all this? What I would like to just convey is that we need to get to the point where we understand that by doing our work and standing up for the professional principles and ethics, we are fighting the bigger fight. It's not extra. This is by continually defending and asserting the principles that have been established over decades and longer, that this is actually the fight. So, okay. Now the next slide. The next little highlight here is Rap-Couder Committee and McCarthyism, the purges of faculty that happened. So going backwards, we actually started in the Vietnam era, 80s, 9/11. Now I'm going back even further. The Rap-Couder Committee, I don't know if folks have heard of that. It's very well known in New York State higher education. It was the New York State legislators' joint legislative committee to investigate the educational system of the state of New York. It was in the early 40s, so 1940 to 42-ish. It subpoenaed and interrogated more than 500 faculty, staff, and students, particularly those involved in any alleged communist-related organizations. City College, which is part of the City University of New York, was the flagship, especially became a target of the committee, with dozens of faculty and staff called to public hearings and demanded to name names of other communist sympathizers in the school. And by the close of the committee, more than 50 faculty and staff at CCNY were left without jobs after they were identified as communists by two friendly witnesses at the school. That segment that I just said was actually appeared in the CUNY Digital History Archive, which is a digital project that I have been working with for a couple of years. And we have a whole collection about the Rap-Couder Committee. But what's interesting about it is it was sort of a local fight that then proved sort of how to take it nationally, right? How to do this work through the House Un-American Activities Committee and McCarthyism generally. And so for reading a bit more about that, I highly recommend, of course, Ellen Schrecker's No Ivory Tower. You see the cover of that book there. She goes into detail about, what was the response, what was the reaction of the universities, because many of the universities at the time spoke in very lofty terms about academic freedom and defending, due process and democracy. But despite what they said, the people in these institutions still went through the process of dismissals, right? Still did not actually take a stand to stop the dismissal of faculty. So it's one thing for faculty to get called in front of a hearing and to have to, go through this public ordeal, and then more quietly afterwards, actually having them lose their job and lose the ability to get hired anywhere else. That's the area of complicity that really is outlined in Schrecker's book. And so for that, again, similarly to before, I think a lesson that we need to take from that period is how important it is to support each other publicly and to take steps to ensure that our actions are meeting our words. Librarians, especially in academic libraries, should take care to align themselves with the faculty. Sometimes that can be in opposition to the administration. And I know that it can be difficult because librarians sometimes have a fraught relationship with the faculty on our campus. And it's sometimes easy to just align with, okay, we're overseen by the provost. They want us to do this. They want us to do that. It's very easy to fall into the habit of supporting the administration. And I think at this time, especially as we see our work to defend the institution of higher education, we do need to be aligning with the faculty who are on our side of the fight to defend higher education and assert our rights as educators. So I'm almost done. The last example of supporting publicly, I just had to show this. It's a very local thing, but it's a resolution that was presented to the Library Association at the City University of New York by Joan Marshall at the time, April 17th, 1972. And that was a very local resolution. It's one of those things people would say, well, what does it really do? What does it mean that the small library organization is aligning in support of Zoya Horn? It means a lot to individuals who are under attack, but also noting here, the reason I have this here is that there's be it resolved that we support initially ALA had Baccarat, and be it further resolved that to demonstrate their support, the Library Association is going to donate to the fund that was going to be her legal defense fund. And so being able to support people publicly, just morally, but also financially and, concretely in these ways is going to be more and more important, I think. So that's what I would take from that. I'm sorry if I went over time.
Thanks, Roxanne. And now Miriam, please.
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne. That was really illuminating at this moment, I think. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. So, hi, my name is Miriam Posner. I am coming to you from Los Angeles, where I am newly an associate professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. So, I feel like I have an extra responsibility to be a truth teller right now. And I'm honored to be speaking with such an esteemed group of information professionals. You may have noticed that I am not myself a student or a librarian, even though I am speaking on how librarians can support students right now, but I could not resist the invitation to be part of this panel, and I will do my best to represent both sides here. So the first thing I wanted to say is that you are already doing a lot. And I know how hard librarians are working and under such difficult circumstances. You know that too. Sometimes I thought maybe it helps to hear from an outsider that It's more important now than ever that you take care of yourselves in whatever way that makes sense, including, organizing to defend your working conditions. I think any measure that improves your working conditions is also a boon to students, because of course it means you have more energy and time for student support. So students are struggling too, as you know. It's been, as a professor, it's been indescribably awful to watch the aperture of opportunity for them just drastically constrict right in front of their eyes. Grad school offers are being rescinded, grants are being pulled, jobs are being eliminated, and, people are being hounded to pay back student loans. And it's, this has become like an invisible blanket that weighs on us in every class I teach. What is going to happen for them when they graduate and even before? This uncertainty is really destabilizing, especially for students who are not US citizens. It's just devastating. And I wish they were graduating into a kinder and less dystopian world. But at UCLA, librarians have really pointed the way for the rest of us on staff at the university by being at the forefront of supporting students who protest or strike for better working conditions or fuller freedom of speech. And I think it gives hope to all of us to see these professionals who have so thoroughly absorbed librarianship's imperative never to mistake the status quo for neutrality. And just because an imbalance of power exists does not mean that it should exist in a decent and just world. And information professionals, I think, have the training and expertise to see through rhetoric about civility and professionalism and to the arrangements of power that lie underneath. I think librarians also understand how deeply all our fates are connected. What's good for the janitors and the adjuncts and the lecturers and the students is also good for the library. Because, really, we're all we have. We can only resist tyranny effectively if we see ourselves and defend ourselves as a collective, just as Roxanne was underlining. I was talking to my students about, what the library is or could be for them at this moment in time, and the word sanctuary came up a lot. So they already know and treasure the library as a place they can go to learn and just be without judgment or imperative. And with all the talk circulating right now about running government and organizations like businesses, I think this term sanctuary has taken on an additional meaning as a place you can go, one of the only places you can go to get a reprieve from that profit-seeking imperative. It's one of the very few places where no one will try to sell you anything, and where the people who work there are devoted to doing what benefits you rather than the bottom line. And it's so important because it means the entire direction of the organization is pointed toward benefiting the reader rather than building profit. And it means, of course, that libraries have a responsibility to stand up for patrons' rights and protections in a way that would be very difficult at other organizations. Uniquely among institutions, they have an obligation to ask where students' data goes, for example, and to resist incursions by government surveillance, just like Zoya Horn did. This imperative to protect students' freedom of thought and freedom of speech and their freedom to read and write freely has never been more critical than it is now. In a way, I think the ethos of librarianship has been preparing us for exactly this moment. Private companies might be able to build more expensive and cutting-edge interfaces, maybe, and sometimes they look more polished and sleeker, but they can never replicate the one element of luxury that comes with librarianship, which is that the library has the right and obligation to serve and not profit from its user. And I would take that one element of luxury over, any amount of snacks in the break room. Any incursion of market incentives into the library erodes that single value proposition. and threatens this unique status of the library in our society. And I think students see this and treasure it and count on it. We talk a lot in library land about modernizing and streamlining systems and making things easier to access, and students do really appreciate this. But the one thing I think we shouldn't lose as we modernize is the most important criterion that separates the library from every single other institution in the world, which is that the library doesn't sell you anything. That's important not just in the literal sense of exchanging dollars for services, but also in the philosophical and political orientation that the entire institution adopts to its patrons. So thank you, for doing what you do, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Miriam. Now I'm delighted to have my comrade Meredith Kahn from the University of Michigan. How can unions help?
Hi, everybody. So good to see you all. I have the wonderful task of talking a little bit about how unions can help us meet this moment. So my name is Meredith Kahn. I'm a librarian at the University of Michigan. I'm talking to you from Ann Arbor, and I'm also a co-author along with Emily and some of our other colleagues of the first book that the American Library Association is going to publish about labor in about 40 years. So we're really excited about that. So how can unions help us meet this moment? Well, first of all, the union and its contract is a tool that, here, let me get my screen going here. There we go. The union and your contract is a tool that helps minimize risk to individuals and to maximize benefits to all. And the reason that this is important is that our working conditions determine teaching and research conditions. And you heard Roxanne and Miriam hint at that. And so it almost feels silly to explain it this way, but it really is true, because you can only have academic freedom if there is a freedom to read. Academic freedom is conditioned upon free access, unimpeded access to information. And we are the folks who protect that for the campuses that we work on. So a contract can protect workers from undue political influence or capricious decisions from management. And that's important because many of us work in subject areas that have suddenly become the focus of the culture wars. So I will include myself in that. I happen to be the librarian for Gender and Sexuality Studies. But I also have a colleague who curates collections related to radical and protest movements. A surprising number of academic disciplines are now the focus of the culture wars. And so it's very important that myself and my colleagues cannot suddenly be fired for buying the wrong books. It's important to protect those rights. The other thing I'll mention is about minimizing those risks and maximizing those benefits. Contracts contain tools like progressive discipline, just cause, process for layoff and recall. These sound like scary things, but having them written down creates a situation where the employer has to follow rules that they agree to. And when the employer chooses not to follow those rules, you have additional structures to do something about that. So it's really a set of guidelines that help make what happens in the workplace more predictable, to guard against undue political influence, capricious decisions. The other thing that's important to remember is maximizing those benefits. So what we do as librarians, we are increasingly asked to do more with less. And the students and the faculty that we serve will see the impacts of that. The quality of the services that we can offer will decline. And so one way we can combat that is through strong unions, strong contracts. And I'll give a concrete example of this. So I work at the University of Michigan. I'm on the Ann Arbor campus, but I have colleagues who work at the University of Michigan Flint, about an hour north of here. And there used to be 11 librarians at UM Flint. Now there are 6. And granted, there have been enrollment declines at the University of Michigan Flint campus, but not such that it would justify a loss of that many librarians. So we just recently finished a contract campaign here at the University of Michigan. I am an elected leader in a union for librarians, archivists, and curators. And one of the things that we managed to win during that contract campaign was 3 new librarian positions at the University of Michigan Flint. So we increased the number of librarians on that campus by 50%. And that was an incredible win. It was something that we are very proud of, and it will benefit the students and faculty of the University of Michigan Flint. And it will also benefit students and faculty everywhere at the University of Michigan, because we are one university. Despite the fact that we have 3 geographic campuses, we are one university. So that's a little bit about why it's important to have a union to protect your working conditions. So the next thing I want to mention, how unions can help us meet this moment, is that solidarity is just good for morale. So in a difficult and uncertain time, the structure of the union gives members a place to plug in and to do things that will make a difference in their own daily lives and in the lives of their colleagues. And these can be really mundane things, but they can also be really meaningful and important things. So an example of this, we had a colleague who actually had a kitchen fire, and we were able, through the mutual aid network in our union, to spin up a fundraiser for this colleague so that they could have some extra money while they're staying in a hotel. And those are small gestures that are incredibly meaningful to that individual member. We just have fun when we do these things. So this is a great image of my colleague, Scott Dennis, who is our philosophy librarian. During our contract campaign, we had a lot of in-person events, and we got people to come out and have signs, and it's really wonderful. We fed people lunch while we fought for a fair contract. We also held a read-in event on the front steps of the Graduate Library here in Ann Arbor. This was, again, part of our contract campaign, and so it was motivated toward helping us win a fair contract, but it was also just fun. We got to hang out together in person, in first life, as it were, and we got to spend time with one another, hear what's going on in our lives. And that structure, that being able to do something together, it really does actually make people feel better in these times where it can feel very confusing and anxiety inducing about, like, what can I actually do? And then the last thing I want to mention is that by building strong member-led unions that are built on a foundation of workplace democracy, we can be ready to respond to a variety of difficult situations. And I want to give another concrete example of this. So when we were interviewing library workers for our book, we talked to some public librarians in Metro Detroit at the Westland Public Library. They formed a union in 2017. And a number of those workers were actually fired in response to organizing a union. But they managed to get their jobs back. They managed to gain recognition for their union, and they were bargaining a contract. And prior to bargaining that contract, they had had many years of difficulties in dealing with management around closures for weather events. So it would snow, and the library would have to be closed, and it was never clear, were people going to get paid? Were they not going to get paid? Did they have to come in? Were they not allowed to come in? And so this contract was being negotiated pre-COVID. And so these folks managed to get some very good contract language about closures, unanticipated closures. And they did this, before COVID was a thing, before any of us could imagine that a global pandemic would shut down our entire state. And it ended up that a few years later, when the state of Michigan shut down, the contract protections that these folks had meant that they weren't immediately all laid off. It protected their jobs for long enough so that once the state instituted some pandemic unemployment benefits, those folks could actually still get paid, even though they weren't necessarily working as much as they had been before. So it was a really critical job protection that union never could have anticipated that was necessary. But because they already had an analogous problem and they developed some really great contract language around it and got it into their contract, they were ready for a future that they really couldn't have anticipated. And there are so many different examples. If you go out and talk to people in their workplaces and talk about how contract language can help protect them from sort of things that they hadn't anticipated. You can come up with lots of great examples, but I love that Westland Public Library example because, closing the library for a snowstorm is a thing that many of us are familiar with if we live in climates. And sadly, it's going to be something, closing for inclement weather will be something that many more of us have to deal with in the future. So having a strong union, having a strong contract, these are things that help us make our way through uncertain times. And I just want to close on this really cute image of a bunch of our colleagues sitting on the front steps of the library. And I can't say enough how much solidarity really is incredible in the workplace, because you get to know your colleagues as people, as humans, as not just somebody that you work with, but somebody that they have, issues in the workplace and you can help them. And it really does make people feel like they're making a difference. And many of us work in this profession because we take a lot of meaning in our work, and it can be very fulfilling, but it can also be very tiring. And the union and the structure of the union can give people a new way to sort of implement some of why we love doing our jobs. And it can help refresh us and make us feel more excited about the day-to-day of our work. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Meredith, and thanks everyone for framing out this conversation a little bit. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I invite anybody in the audience, if you have a question or a comment, to share that in the Q&A box. And we have a couple there, but I'd like to start, as you were talking, I was thinking about all of the different ways that all of us are sort of trying to organize our resistance at this point. Like, do I, the problems are so large, do I take them on in my position as a Marxist lesbian, or as a unionist, or as a librarian? Like, what is the vector of our resistance? And I wonder if the three of you could speak a little bit. Do you see academic librarians? And I know, Miriam, you're a professor, but as you're teaching the future academic librarians, is there something core to what we do that makes a contribution to the fight against fascism in the current moment? Maybe we can start with you, Roxanne.
Okay. Core in what we do in terms of advocating and protecting confidential access to information and privacy, I think is key, as Meredith had explained, tying it to academic freedom. I think just going back to your first comment of where we locate our resistance, I guess I'll just take the opportunity to comment that I've been doing an incredible amount of Senate work through faculty governance, that sort of, committee work, which is really, talk about ordinarily just tedious, I think is maybe the word I'll say. And it really forces you to see, again, I think what I was trying to get across, that the work is tedious, but it needs to continue. And I think that's what's keeping me grounded during this time, is I feel like I am making a contribution in baby steps to defending the institution of higher education by whatever procedural, thing we're doing, even if it feels cosmetic, I guess, in some way. That's not the right word, but I'm thinking about all of these mutual defense compacts that are going on in all of the in so many public universities. So faculty senates right now are passing these mutual defense compacts, where we're talking about building a kind of state network to defend against federal cuts in funding and so forth. And sometimes people are very cynical and negative and say, well, what does that actually do? You don't actually have the power to whatever, calling on the chancellor to do this, or calling on the president to do this. I do think it's important to continue to do that. And so, and it gives me a little bit of an outlet, because things can feel so overwhelming. Where do I start? Start where I can have influence, and I can have influence in trying my best to stop the ed tech vultures from, privatizing all of the day-to-day. I can be the person who objects when someone talks about sharing circulation overdue book information with, EAB, so that we can nudge students to get their books back, right? Like all the ways that information that should be siloed starts to merge into these nefarious ways, like, the times that they swipe to get into the library, does that go into the, combined with the LMS data, like all of these things, I think, to protect the freedom of inquiry in our institutions, and freedom of movement even in our institutions sometimes. So I talked too long.
Miriam. Oh, and just quickly, I saw a comment, I think that was from you, Talia, about, when our libraries are securitized, it makes that freedom of movement harder. And so that as a site of struggle, also, it's something that your comment made me think about. Miriam?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I would echo what Roxanne said. And one of the most important kind of tenets of librarianship to hold up right now is the freedom of inquiry. And librarians have a unique they uniquely have a vision or understanding of how information systems work and where information and data goes. I mean, it's their job to do that. And so there's some of the people in the university, more than IT, more than ed tech, who are best positioned to rein in abuses of access to students' data. I think also, you've probably talked or thought about before the fact that if someone were to propose the idea of a library at this moment in time, it would be kind of total non-starter, because the ethos of librarianship in some ways is an artifact of a moment when not everyone, but many people understood the right to inquiry and information as something that we're owed. And so I think like continuing to serve as a beacon of that right is critical to all of us right now.
Meredith, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just sort of coming after what Roxanne said about working through faculty governance. One of the interesting things about faculty governance at my own institution is that librarians, archivists, and curators, we are members of the faculty, and so we get to participate in faculty governance, and we are highly sought after as committee members because we actually show up and do work. No shade to our tenure track colleagues. So sometimes it can feel very like, oh, what's the point of even trying anything? Oh, if we have this petition, what's really going to happen? Well, only one way to find out. And so you just got to try. And using that reputation that we all have as people who are really committed to getting work done, we can advance some causes, and we can be successful in ways that, maybe some of our tenure track colleagues might not be able to be as successful, because I think many of us have some skills in the workplace that allow us to do that. We know how to make a list. We know how to talk to people. We know how to do a reference interview. We know how to get information out of people and direct them to where they need to go next. And those skills make us good organizers, and being good organizers makes us good at getting shit done. And you won't know if something is achievable unless you fight for it. So a good example of this is in our most recent contract campaign, we managed to get some language around artificial intelligence into our contract. We will be the first union at the University of Michigan with any contract language about AI. And that means that we didn't get everything we wanted, but we started a conversation, and all of the other workers who come after us can continue that conversation. And they can do it in ways that we might never have anticipated. So we're already having conversations with rank and file nurses here at the University of Michigan who want to know about the AI language that we got in our contract, because they also have concerns about AI. And you could think oh, nurses and librarians, how much do we have in common? Well, we both work in, feminized pink collar professions. And we both have some concerns about how AI might be used in the particular context that we work in. And did we think we were going to be successful in getting AI language into our contract? We honestly weren't sure. And we were a little surprised that we were, but we tried it and it worked.
I love that, Meredith. I also think a lot about how much we could take from nursing unions' focus on safe staffing ratios. That's something they fight for in their contracts that I think we could fight for in ours. We have a few questions in the Q&A, so I'll just start with the first one. Do any of you know of any protest plans for DC or state capitals about damage being done to libraries? Any protest other than the sort of mass protests that we're seeing around the Tesla takedown and other kinds of events? No. No. So anonymous attendee, if you know of any, please share in the chat. Those build. A question for you, Meredith. Can you speak to the state of DEI in Michigan? Are people fighting back against Trump's edicts there?
Oh, yes, they are. And so this is actually a good example of, the connections that we have with other folks on campus. So there are unions who are fighting back against this. Also, our faculty governance apparatus is fighting back against this. And in our ability to talk to one another outside of the boundaries of whether or not we're in the same union, whether or not we're the same kind of faculty, I think has been helpful. We've had some high profile events here at the University of Michigan to push back on some of that. We're also in kind of a strange moment. As many of you might have seen, our president is leaving to go to the University of Florida. And so it's going to be an interesting time here at the University of Michigan.
Meredith, you have a few requests for your contract, a copy of your contract language in the chat. So maybe you can.
Yeah, we are working on copy editing it with management right now. And once it is available, it will be up on our union's website.
We have two questions. Could any of you that are sort of related, talking about organizing as workers in a very small, specialized institution, how to organize in private universities? Do any of you have thoughts on those questions? I mean, I would say like buy the book when it comes out. I put a link to it in the chat, and I'll also a group of us are organizing a sort of labor notes style troublemaker school in Philadelphia the day before ALA annual starts in June. So I'll put a link in the chat to sign up for that. But there will be 40 of us gathering to talk about how to organize from unions and non-union environments across the country. So free. The AFL-CIO is picking up lunch, so I hope you'll join us if you're able to. Those are sort of big questions that I think can best be answered there. And I'll put a couple of other resources in the chat for people who want to get started unionizing, and send me an email. I'm always happy to talk to anybody, as is anybody who's done union work, I think. Meredith, how many phone calls have you had about how to start a union? Probably many, right? Yeah, we're always around and available to have those conversations. Does anyone know of efforts or storage locations to save physical materials that may soon be purged? Anyone know of anything? I know of two. One is an organization called Invisible Histories, which does work archiving the queer history of the South. They are actively going out and bringing threatened physical collections from states like Florida and moving them so that they can be kept safe. And I'm not entirely sure where, but I believe there's a building fund, and Invisible Histories is the organization. And you can, as a librarian, I'm sure, Google them and see some of their efforts. Also, I've been involved in a couple of conversations that are about how to preserve the holdings of closed federal libraries, such that those holdings records could be reconstituted in the event that the library is reconstituted, if we are able to make our way out of this fascist moment and come out the other side with a renewed appreciation for the value of the state when it acts on behalf of us knowing stuff. So I think there's some of those conversations, but I'm not sure of others, the safeguarding of physical collections. Yeah. Like, I'm looking at the questions. I don't know about you all, but like, as soon as I capture one little corner of the elephant, and I feel like I've really understood that how bad it is in this one little spot, then I begin to think about how to safeguard physical collections from ethnic studies librarians. And I feel like there's a whole other can of worms, but I guess that's part of the point. A few more, there are quite a few questions in the chat. How would any or each of you ask graduate students in the field to mobilize in solidarity with faculty? And I would suggest maybe in solidarity with the kinds of fights that we're talking about. I wonder, Miriam, if you have any thoughts from the students you work with.
Well, I think, I mean, as I said, students are already freaked out and worried, having trouble sleeping because of what's coming down the pike. And my observation is that they are really looking for something to do about it. You know, there's not, for many of them, there's not an obvious place to route their anger and confusion. And so it seems to me that like helping to show them that they have common cause with librarians would really help, you know, both sides materially, and then even just as a like mental health measure, finding solidarity with people who are also committed to inquiry is good for both, for the entire organization, really. A lot of it is just about telling them what librarians do, in my experience.
Any other thoughts on that? Getting students, organizing with students?
Yeah, I can say one of the things that's been helpful at the University of Michigan is connecting with relevant student groups who are organizing around similar projects or concerns. So, you know, we've talked about the way that library spaces have been used as part of surveillance, the example at Columbia. So here at the University of Michigan, there's a student chapter of the ACLU at our law school that is also interested in fighting back against surveillance on our campus. And so it's been great to talk to those folks, to talk to faculty who have an advocacy chapter for AAUP, who have similar concerns. And so really talking to student groups, also talking to student press. So the only daily newspaper here in Ann Arbor is actually the Michigan Daily. It's our campus newspaper, and they have really good coverage of what's going on campus. So talking to folks who are student news reporters, student journalists.
We've got we're coming down to the last, and I want to make sure that we address this question because in my experience, it has been almost impossible to address this question in library spaces. As somebody who's spent all of you know, an entire year in the height of the censorship crisis as the president of the American Library Association, the restrictions on speech around those who are protesting the ongoing genocide in Palestine, that seems to be the thing about which we cannot speak. So we have a question about how much the issue of free speech around Palestine and, you know, of course, the genocide in Palestine, how this issue challenges our notions of neutrality, thinking about how those spaces are used, thinking about the use of those spaces or the use of libraries as spaces of protest, and thoughts about what our organizing might look like on that issue. Anyone?
I mean, I think that this is like the signal issue where it becomes critical to put our money where our mouth is about the kind of illusory nature of neutrality. I mean, if we're serious about what we do and believe in, then I think we need to stand up for the students who are being persecuted for speaking against genocide right now. I do think librarians in particular have some credibility here that perhaps people don't award to faculty, because, you know, faculty are weird and like, you know, long-haired, you know, freaks or whatever. But librarians, we know librarians, we trust librarians. Like, we went to story time at the library. And so hearing from librarians about students' right to speak and question, especially on this most sensitive on college campuses, on this most sensitive issue, I think could be really meaningful. Right, they don't grade.
And I just wanted to bring back some of those histories with Zoya Horn. The point being that it is a matter of principle, and at the time you get so many people saying, "Oh, but they're violent," or I'm the Harrisburg Seven were like charged with trying to assassinate Kissinger or something. Like it was a full like you're helping violent people, you're helping people do, that was not the point at all. The point is not the whether what they're doing. The point was to protect the confidentiality of that relationship between a librarian and a researcher, or a librarian and the person you're helping, to say, no, I don't care what they're accused of doing, right? And it's the same with the Patriot Act situation, which, there are rules increasingly being developed on our campuses. And then if we're not willing to break some rules that shouldn't be rules to begin with, the arbitrariness of where you can have freedom of expression. Oh, the fact that it's a tent means it's not allowed, right? There are so many things, so many ways for us to easily just say, oh, well, but they shouldn't break the rules. Oh, well, but get away from that and remember that this is important. Freedom of expression, freedom of inquiry. This is what we're trying to protect. We have to protect it for everybody, regardless of what, the taint. It makes it scary for people to speak up because, that's this whole anti-communist purge, the story of it, right? We are only going to protect ourselves by standing up for each other publicly and being together, right? So not falling into those traps of nitpicking. Well, they shouldn't have done this. Well, they shouldn't have carried that one sign. I didn't like the one sign that they had. Let's get to where we need to be.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, yeah. It's not about the sign that you carried. I think that's important. And I appreciate you closing us out, Roxanne, on that note of the importance of solidarity and standing together in the face of these crises. So I don't think any of us would suggest that a 1-hour webinar will enable academic libraries to meet the moment, but I see this as an initial conversation, and the response from folks has really been great to see, and I look forward to our future conversations. I put Baharak with a very good point in the chat. Palestine challenges our ideas of liberalism as fundamentally different from fascism. Absolutely. So many more conversations to have. Please stay up to date with Library Use Connections, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.